Some people do not enter your life to stay. They enter your life to break an illusion you were never supposed to live inside forever. And the painful part is, you usually realize this too late. At first, they felt like fate, like comfort, like home. Their words reached parts of you nobody else could touch. They understood your silence, your loneliness, your hidden wounds, and for a moment, you believed the universe had finally rewarded your suffering with someone who would never hurt you. But then something changed. Maybe they slowly became distant. Maybe they betrayed your trust. Maybe they left without explanation. Or maybe they stayed while making you feel completely alone. And ever since then, one question has haunted your mind. Why would someone come into my life only to destroy me? But what if they didn't destroy you? What if they revealed something you desperately needed to see? Because not every painful person is a punishment. Some people are mirrors, some are warnings, some are awakenings disguised as heartbreak. And sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the same people who force you to meet the version of yourself you were avoiding for years. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Maybe this person was never meant to complete you. Maybe they were meant to expose your deepest fears, your attachment, your self-abandonment, your hunger to be chosen. And tonight, we are going to uncover the painful lesson this person was sent to teach you, even if it shattered your heart in the process, because some lessons only arrive wearing the face of someone you loved. Part 1. The lesson of attachment. Most people think heartbreak comes from losing another person, but often heartbreak comes from losing the version of yourself that existed around them. Think about it carefully. Before this person entered your life, you had routines, dreams, peace, identity, but slowly, without noticing, your emotional world began revolving around them. Their texts affected your mood. Their attention became your validation. Their presence became your emotional oxygen. And that is where suffering quietly begins. Buddha taught that attachment is the root of suffering, not love itself. Attachment. Because attachment says, "I cannot be okay without you." And the dangerous thing is, modern relationships often glorify this. Movies call it romance. Social media calls it loyalty. But psychologically, it can become emotional imprisonment. This person may have entered your life to expose how much of yourself you were abandoning just to keep someone else close. Maybe you ignored red flags because you feared loneliness. Maybe you accepted disrespect because losing them felt worse than losing yourself. Maybe you kept chasing closure from someone who had already emotionally left. And here is the painful truth nobody wants to hear. When you desperately need someone to stay, you stop seeing them clearly. You stop asking, "Are they healthy for me?" and start asking, "How do I stop them from leaving?" That shift changes everything. Carl Jung believed that what we seek obsessively in others often reflects something missing within ourselves. So perhaps this person was never the source of your completeness. Perhaps they exposed the emptiness you were trying to escape. And maybe that realization hurts because deep down, you know it's true. The lesson was never about becoming cold or detached from love. The lesson was learning how to love without abandoning yourself. Because real love should add to your life, not become the reason your life collapses. And sometimes, the people who leave are simply revealing where you were too emotionally dependent to truly be free. Part 2. The lesson of self-worth. There is a silent tragedy that happens in unhealthy relationships. It does not happen all at once. It happens slowly, quietly, invisibly. You begin shrinking yourself. You become more careful with your words. You hide your emotions so you do not seem too much. You tolerate disrespect because confronting it might push them away. You give endless chances because you hope one day they will finally love you the way you love them. And one day you wake up exhausted, wondering why you no longer recognize yourself. But the truth is, this person did not create your lack of self-worth. They revealed it. That is the painful lesson, because people often treat us according to the standards we secretly accept for ourselves. If you believe deep down that love must be earned through sacrifice, pain, or proving your value, you will unconsciously tolerate relationships that drain your spirit. Nietzsche once wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." And many people stay in painful relationships because they create a why in their mind. They convince themselves, maybe they are struggling. Maybe if I love harder, they'll change. Maybe I just need to be more patient. But there is a difference between compassion and self-destruction. A tree cannot survive if it gives away all its roots trying to save another dying tree. And perhaps this person entered your life to force you into a brutal awakening. You cannot beg people to see your value. The deepest form of self-respect is walking away from places where your soul feels constantly unwanted. Think about how many people lose themselves trying to avoid abandonment. They become performers instead of human beings. They shape-shift into whatever keeps love from disappearing, but real love does not require you to erase yourself. The philosopher Lao Tzu said, "When you are content to be simply yourself and don't compare or compete, everybody will respect you." And maybe that is the lesson this heartbreak was sent to teach you. Not everyone who leaves your life is taking something from you. Sometimes they are removing the illusion that your worth depended on their presence, because your value did not decrease when they failed to appreciate you. The sun does not become less bright simply because someone closed their eyes. And perhaps, for the first time in your life, you are finally being asked to choose yourself. Sometimes they are removing the illusion that your worth depended on their presence, because your value did not decrease when they failed to appreciate you. The sun does not become less bright simply because someone closed their eyes. And perhaps for the first time in your life, you are finally being asked to choose yourself. Part 3. The lesson of illusions. Most people do not fall in love with reality. They fall in love with potential, with imagined futures, with the version of someone they hoped existed beneath the mixed signals, the inconsistency, the emotional distance. And this is why letting go feels unbearable, because you are not just grieving memories, you are grieving an entire future that never happened. You imagined growing old together, healing together, building a life together. But slowly, reality began fighting against the story you wanted to believe. Their actions stopped matching their words. Their effort became inconsistent. Their love started feeling conditional. And yet a part of you kept holding on. Why? Because the human mind hates shattered illusions. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance, the painful tension between what we want to believe and what reality keeps showing us. So instead of accepting the truth, many people create excuses. He's just confused. She's been hurt before. They'll change eventually. But people reveal themselves through patterns, not promises. And perhaps this person entered your life to teach you one of the most painful adult lessons of all. Love cannot survive inside denial. Carl Jung believed that humans often project hidden desires onto others. In simple words, we sometimes see people not as they truly are, but as reflections of our own longing. You saw the loyalty you wished for. You saw the depth you craved. You saw emotional safety because you desperately needed to feel chosen, but reality eventually removes every mask. And that moment is devastating, because suddenly you realize the person you were fighting for may have existed more in your imagination than in real life. This is why heartbreak feels like waking up from a dream. At first, you resist it. You replay memories. You search for hidden meanings. You revisit old conversations hoping to find proof that the love was real, but eventually clarity arrives. And clarity is painful before it becomes freeing. Because once you see someone clearly, you can no longer unsee them. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer once said, All truth passes through three stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as self-evident. The same happens in heartbreak. First, you deny the truth. Then you fight the truth. Then one quiet day, you finally accept it. And acceptance is where healing truly begins. Because the lesson was never to stop believing in love. The lesson was learning to stop confusing emotional attachment with genuine connection. Some people enter your life not to become your forever, but to teach you the danger of loving illusions more than reality. Part 4. The lesson of transformation. And this is the part nobody talks about. Months later, maybe years later, you begin noticing something strange. The pain that once destroyed you slowly starts changing you. Not immediately, not magically, but quietly. You become more aware of red flags, more protective of your peace, more honest about your emotional needs. You stop chasing people who give you confusion instead of clarity, and one day you realize the person who hurt you also awakened you. That is the final lesson. Some people enter your life not as soulmates, but as catalysts for transformation. Because before this heartbreak, perhaps you were asleep in certain parts of your life. Maybe you ignored your intuition. Maybe you tolerated less than you deserved. Maybe you depended on external validation to feel worthy. Maybe you feared loneliness so deeply that you accepted emotional suffering as the price of companionship. But pain has a strange way of forcing consciousness. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Pain insists upon being attended to," and heartbreak does exactly that. It forces you to confront the parts of yourself you spent years avoiding, the loneliness, the insecurity, the fear of abandonment, the childhood wounds hidden. And this is the part nobody talks about. Months later, maybe years later, you begin noticing something strange. The pain that once destroyed you slowly starts changing you, not immediately, not magically, but quietly. You become more aware of red flags, more protective of your peace, more honest about your emotional needs. You stop chasing people who give you confusion instead of clarity. And one day, you realize the person who hurt you also awakened you. That is the final lesson. Some people enter your life not as soulmates, but as catalysts for transformation. Because before this heartbreak, perhaps you were asleep in certain parts of your life. Maybe you ignored your intuition. Maybe you tolerated less than you deserved. Maybe you depended on external validation to feel worthy. Maybe you feared loneliness so deeply that you accepted emotional suffering as the price of companionship. But pain has a strange way of forcing consciousness. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Pain insists upon being attended to," and heartbreak does exactly that. It forces you to confront the parts of yourself you spent years avoiding, the loneliness, the insecurity, the fear of abandonment, the childhood wounds hidden beneath adult relationships. This is why some heartbreaks feel spiritual, because they do not only break your heart, they break your identity. But destruction is sometimes necessary before transformation can begin. A forest fire looks tragic while it burns, yet hidden beneath the ashes, new life quietly prepares itself to grow. And maybe that is exactly what is happening to you right now. Maybe this person was never sent to ruin your life. Maybe they were sent to interrupt a cycle, to force your awakening, to teach boundaries, to deepen your self-respect, to reconnect you with the version of yourself you abandoned while trying to be loved. Camus once said, "In the depth of winter, I finally learned that within me there lay an invincible summer." And perhaps this painful chapter was meant to reveal your own hidden strength. Because look at yourself. You survived nights you thought would destroy you. You carried grief nobody fully understood. You kept moving forward even when your chest felt heavy with disappointment. That is not weakness, that is transformation. And maybe the greatest lesson this person taught you was this: Not everyone who breaks your heart ruins your future. Some people break your heart so you can finally rebuild your life on truth instead of illusion. So if someone hurt you, betrayed you, abandoned you, do not rush to ask, "Why did this happen to me?" Instead ask, "What was this pain trying to teach me?" Because life often sends teachers disguised as heartbreak, and the lessons they leave behind can change the entire direction of your future. One day, you may look back at this pain not with anger, but with understanding. Not because what happened was fair, not because it did not hurt, but because it forced you to become someone wiser, stronger, and more awake. And maybe that was the purpose all along. Sometimes the most painful people carry the most important lessons. If this video spoke to something deep inside you, leave a comment with the words, "I finally understand the lesson." And remember, some endings are not punishments, they are awakenings.